Detective Sarah Mitchell froze mid-step, her weathered hand gripping Zeus's leash as the German shepherd's hackles rose like razor wire. The abandoned Henderson barn stretched before them, silent as a tomb in the Colorado afternoon heat. What should have been a routine abandoned vehicle call had become something else entirely. Zeus wasn't barking at raccoons or field mice. His powerful body trembled with an urgency Sarah had never witnessed in their 4 years together. His amber eyes locked on a patch of dirt floor with laser intensity. Jesus Christ, what's got into him? Deputy Collins muttered, stepping backward as Zeus clawed frantically at the weathered wooden planks, his desperate whines echoing off the barn's skeletal rafters. Sarah's coffee-stained notepad slipped from her fingers, forgotten. In 32 years of law enforcement, she'd learned to trust her instincts, but Zeus's instincts had never failed them. The floorboards beneath Zeus's paws weren't just old wood, they were hiding something. Something that made a seasoned K-9 officer shake with primal recognition. What had they stumbled onto in this godforsaken place? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 6 months earlier, Detective Sarah Mitchell had been counting down to retirement like a prisoner marking days on a cell wall. At 58, with 32 years of badge work behind her, she'd seen enough human darkness to fill a dozen lifetimes. Her modest ranch house on Maple Street felt more like a way station than a home, just her, Zeus, and the ghosts of cases that never quite let go. Zeus had been her salvation, though she'd never admit it out loud. The 4-year-old German shepherd had arrived as a scrawny, 8-week-old puppy from a disbanded puppy mill, all ribs and fear. Sarah had bottle-fed him through sleepless nights, teaching him to trust again while learning to trust herself. Their partnership transcended the typical handler-canine relationship. Zeus seemed to read her thoughts, anticipate her needs, and most remarkably, sense danger with an accuracy that bordered on supernatural. Millbrook Valley, Colorado, with its population of 8,500 souls, wasn't the kind of place where detective skills got much exercise. Drunk and disorderly calls, domestic disputes that neighbors settled over coffee the next morning, and the occasional theft of farm equipment comprised most of Sarah's caseload. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business, where secrets were currency and gossip traveled faster than wildfire. Eleanor Hartwell represented the town's beating heart. At 72, the retired school principal had taught 3 generations of Millbrook children, including Sarah herself 40 years ago. Eleanor's Victorian house on Main Street served as unofficial community center, her kitchen table hosting everything from marriage counseling to homework help. Since losing her grandson Timothy in that hit-and-run 3 years back, Eleanor had thrown herself into surrogate grandmothering with fierce determination, as if loving other people's children could somehow fill the void. The tragedy had changed Eleanor. Sarah often glimpsed her through the lace curtains, setting 2 plates at dinner instead of 1, talking animatedly to Timothy's photograph propped against the salt shaker. The grief was eating her alive, one lonely meal at a time. Then there was Dr. Marcus Whitmore, the town's beloved pediatrician. 20 years of house calls, midnight emergencies, and sliding scale payments for struggling families had earned him near sainthood status. His free clinic treated anyone regardless of ability to pay, and his gentle manner with frightened children was legendary. Parents drove 50 miles just to have Dr. Whitmore examine their babies. What nobody knew was that Marcus Whitmore was dying inside. 5 years ago, in another state, he'd lost his medical license and custody of his son in a bitter divorce. His ex-wife's family had money, lawyers, connections, everything Marcus lacked. They'd painted him as unstable, obsessive, unfit. The court had agreed. His boy, little Nathan, had been only 6 when the judge's gavel fell like an executioner's axe. Since arriving in Millbrook, Marcus had rebuilt his practice and his reputation, but the wound festered. Every child he treated was Nathan. Every parent who trusted him was a chance at redemption he'd been denied. The abandoned Henderson barn would bring all their stories crashing together. Sarah Mitchell had learned to trust Zeus's instincts over her own logic, but this felt different. The German shepherd's behavior wasn't his usual alert stance. This was desperation, primal and urgent. His claws scraped against the barn's wooden floor with increasing intensity, leaving gouges in the weathered planks. "Mitchell, we've got actual calls waiting," Deputy Collins called from the doorway, jingling his keys impatiently. "Let's wrap this up." But Sarah couldn't move. Zeus had never been wrong, not once in 4 years. When he'd found 8-year-old Tommy Brennan in that ravine last winter, he'd displayed the same focused intensity. When he'd detected the meth lab hidden in the Kowalski basement, he'd shown the same unwavering certainty. But this was different. There was fear in Zeus's amber eyes, something she'd never seen before. "Just give me 5 minutes," Sarah called back, already reaching for her crowbar. The metal tool felt cold and solid in her hands, an anchor to reality as Zeus's whining grew more frantic. The first board came up easier than expected, revealing darkness beneath. Sarah's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating rough wooden steps descending into what appeared to be a root cellar. The smell hit her immediately, not decay or death, but something else. Cleaning supplies, maybe disinfectant. And underneath that, something human. Fear had its own scent. "Hello?" Sarah's voice echoed in the confined space. "Is anyone down there?" The answer came as a whisper, so faint she almost missed it. "Help us." Sarah's blood turned to ice water. She fumbled for her radio with shaking fingers. "Dispatch, this is Detective Mitchell at the Henderson property. I need immediate backup, paramedics, and the fire department. We have possible victims trapped underground." Zeus was already halfway down the stairs, his training warring with his protective instincts. Sarah followed, her weapon drawn but finger off the trigger. The basement was larger than she'd expected, maybe 12 by 15 feet, with concrete walls and adequate ventilation. Battery-powered lanterns provided soft lighting, and she could see sleeping bags, water bottles, and what looked like school books scattered around. 4 children huddled in the far corner, blinking in her flashlight beam like startled deer. The youngest couldn't be more than 6, a girl with dark curls clutching a stuffed rabbit. 2 boys, maybe 7 or 8, sat protectively in front of her. The oldest, a girl around 10, stepped forward with surprising composure. "Are you really police?" the older girl asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Yes, honey, I'm Detective Mitchell and this is Zeus. We're here to help you." Sarah holstered her weapon and knelt to appear less threatening. "Can you tell me your names?" "I'm Emma," the oldest girl said. "This is Carlos and Sophia, they're twins. And this is Lily." She gestured to the youngest. "We've been here for, I think, 6 days? Maybe 7. It's hard to tell." Sarah's mind raced. 6 days. These children had been missing for nearly a week, yet they appeared clean, well-fed, and calm. Their clothes were dirty but not torn, their faces worried but not traumatized in the way she'd expect from kidnapping victims. "Who brought you here?" Sarah asked gently, as sirens wailed in the distance. Emma exchanged glances with the twins. "The doctor said our families couldn't take care of us anymore. He said we'd be safer here until he could find us better homes." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "What doctor, sweetheart?" "Dr. Whitmore." Carlos spoke for the first time, his voice small. "He said Mama was sick and couldn't keep us. He promised we'd see her again when she got better." Sophia nodded, tears starting to flow. "But I want to go home now." "I don't care if Mama's sick." Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Mitchell, units are en route. What's your status?" 4 children located, appear physically unharmed but require immediate medical attention, Sarah reported, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. Dr. Marcus Whitmore, beloved pediatrician, pillar of the community, the man who'd delivered half the babies in Millbrook Valley. Zeus had positioned himself between the children and the stairs, his protective instincts in full display. Emma reached out tentatively to pet him, and his tail wagged once, a good sign. "Detective?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Are there other places like this? The doctor mentioned other children who were waiting for new families, too." Sarah's blood ran cold. Other places, other children. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of something larger, more systematic. She thought about Dr. Whitmore's reputation, his access to vulnerable families, his position of trust in the community. As paramedics and fire department personnel flooded into the basement, Sarah's mind was already racing ahead. If Dr. Whitmore was involved, how many other children were out there? How long had this been going on? And most terrifying of all, who else in Millbrook Valley might be complicit in what was beginning to look like a coordinated operation? Zeus pressed against her leg, sensing her distress. Outside, she could hear more vehicles arriving, including what sounded like Sheriff Garrett's distinctive engine rumble. The real investigation was just beginning. The Millbrook Valley Community Center hadn't seen this many people since the 4th of July picnic. By 7 o'clock Thursday evening, over 300 residents packed the folding chairs and lined the walls, their faces reflecting everything from outrage to confusion to fear. The rescue of 4 children from the Henderson barn had shattered their small town's sense of safety, and now they demanded answers. Sheriff Frank Garrett stood at the podium, his weathered face grim under the harsh fluorescent lights. At 64, he'd planned to retire next year with his reputation intact and his conscience clear. Now he faced the biggest crisis of his 4-decade career, and the truth was uglier than anything he'd imagined. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sheriff Garrett began, his voice carrying across the packed room, "I know you're all here because you want to understand what happened at the Henderson property. I'm going to be straight with you. This investigation has taken some unexpected turns." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sarah Mitchell sat in the front row with Zeus at her feet, the German shepherd's presence somehow reassuring in the charged atmosphere. Eleanor Hartwell had claimed a seat in the second row, her silver hair perfectly arranged despite the emotional turmoil of the past few days. "The 4 children we recovered are physically unharmed," Garrett continued. "But during our investigation we've discovered information that, well, it challenges some assumptions we all made." Dr. Marcus Whitmore entered from the side door, his usual confident stride noticeably slower. The crowd's reaction was immediate and divided. Some people nodded respectfully at their beloved pediatrician, while others whispered and pointed. He took a seat near the back, his face pale but composed. "Sheriff," called out Margaret Chen from the hardware store, "are you saying someone in our community is responsible for taking those children?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Garrett glanced at Sarah, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "We have reason to believe," Garrett said carefully, "that the children were taken by someone they trusted, someone with access to vulnerable families." The murmur grew louder. Eleanor Hartwell rose slowly from her seat, her voice carrying the authority of 4 decades in education. "Frank Garrett, you stop talking in riddles and tell us what's going on. These are our children we're discussing." Before Garrett could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Maria Santos pushed through the crowd, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, clutching a tissue in her trembling hands. Behind her walked Carlos and Sofia, the 7-year-old twins rescued from the barn, staying close to their mother's sides. "I need to say something," Maria announced, her voice shaking but determined. "I need to tell you all the truth." The room fell silent. Maria was a familiar figure in Millbrook, the young single mother who worked 3 jobs, always rushing between the diner, her cleaning clients, and her night security shift. Everyone knew her story. Husband killed in Afghanistan, left alone with premature twins, buried under medical debt that had reached nearly $200,000. "Dr. Whitmore didn't kidnap my children," Maria said, the words falling like stones in the silence. I gave them to him." The reaction was explosive. Voices erupted from all corners of the room, gasps of shock, angry shouts, confused questions. Sheriff Garrett banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. "Let her speak!" Eleanor Hartwell's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room gradually quieted, though the tension remained thick as fog. Maria's voice barely rose above a whisper, but in the sudden silence everyone heard every word. The debt collectors were coming. They were going to take our house, our car, everything. I was working 80 hours a week and still couldn't keep up with the medical bills from when Carlos and Sophia were born. The doctors said they might not survive, and the NICU costs. She broke off, sobbing. Sophia reached up and took her mother's hand. "Dr. Whitmore came to me 6 months ago," Maria continued. "He'd seen how I was struggling. He said he knew families who wanted children, good families with money who could give Carlos and Sophia opportunities I never could. He offered me $75,000 for temporary guardianship while he found them permanent homes." The silence was deafening. Dr. Whitmore had risen from his seat near the back, his face ashen. "I signed papers," Maria whispered. "Legal papers that said he could take care of them while I got back on my feet financially. He promised I could visit them, that they'd know I loved them, that it was just temporary until I could provide better for them." "Maria," Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm, "why didn't you come to us, to the church, to your neighbors? We would have helped." "Because I was ashamed." Maria's voice cracked with anguish. "Because admitting you can't feed your own children, can't keep a roof over their heads, feels like admitting you're a failure as a mother. Because Dr. Whitmore said that if I told anyone, the state would take the children anyway and I'd never see them again." All eyes turned to Dr. Whitmore, who stood slowly. His face had aged years in the past few minutes, the weight of the community's stare pressing down on him like a physical force. "Is this true, Marcus?" Sheriff Garrett's voice was deadly quiet. "Doctor." Whitmore cleared his throat, his usual steady voice wavering. "Maria came to my clinic 6 months ago. Her children had missed vaccinations due to cost. Sophia had an untreated ear infection. Carlos needed dental work she couldn't afford. I saw a family in crisis, and I tried to help." "By taking their children?" The question came from Jake Morrison, the town mechanic, whose own struggles with poverty were well known. "By providing them with a stable environment while their mother got back on her feet," Dr. Whitmore replied, his voice gaining strength. "Look at Maria, working herself to death, never seeing her children, unable to provide basic medical care. I offered them clean living conditions, education, health care, proper nutrition, everything she wanted to give them but couldn't afford." The room erupted again. Some voices supported Maria. She was desperate. What choice did she have? While others condemned her. "You don't sell your children. Those babies needed their mother." Zeus, who had been lying quietly at Sarah's feet, suddenly stood and whined. Sarah looked down to see the dog's ears perked, his body tense with the same alertness he'd shown at the Henderson barn. He was staring intently at Dr. Whitmore, his hackles beginning to rise. Eleanor Hartwell stood again, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This isn't about judging Maria or Dr. Whitmore. This is about understanding how our community failed these children, how we let a mother get so desperate she felt she had no choice, and how we let a man we trusted make choices that weren't his to make." She paused, looking around the packed room at faces she'd known for decades. "The question isn't who's to blame. The question is what we're going to do to make sure this never happens again." But Zeus's continued agitation suggested that the story was far from over, and that Dr. Marcus Whitmore's explanation was only the beginning of a much darker truth. The meeting ended in chaos, but the real revelations began in the quiet aftermath. Sarah Mitchell sat in her patrol car outside the community center at 10:30 that night, Zeus panting beside her in the passenger seat. The German shepherd hadn't relaxed since Dr. Whitmore had started speaking, his agitation growing more pronounced with each passing minute. "What is it, boy?" Sarah murmured, scratching behind Zeus's ears. "You're trying to tell me something, aren't you?" Her radio crackled to life. "Mitchell, you there?" Sheriff Garrett's voice sounded exhausted. "Copy, Sheriff. Need you to meet me at the station. FBI's sending a team up from Denver. This thing's bigger than we thought." Sarah's stomach dropped. FBI involvement meant federal crimes, which meant the scope of what they'd uncovered extended far beyond Millbrook Valley. As she drove through the quiet streets, Zeus remained alert, occasionally whining and looking toward the direction of Dr. Whitmore's clinic. The Millbrook police station, normally dark except for the dispatch desk, blazed with lights. Two unmarked sedans with government plates sat in the parking lot, and Sarah could see unfamiliar figures moving behind the windows. Sheriff Garrett met her at the door, his face grave. "Sarah, I need you to sit down for this," he said, leading her to the conference room where 3 FBI agents waited. Zeus followed, his protective instincts heightened by the tension in the air. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes, introduced herself and her colleagues before spreading files across the table. "Detective Mitchell, your K-9's discovery has opened a case we've been building for 2 years." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. 2 years? "Dr. Marcus Whitmore isn't who he says he is," Agent Walsh continued. "His real name is Marcus Whitfield. 5 years ago, he lost his medical license in Oregon for illegal adoption practices and child endangerment. He's been operating under assumed identities across 3 states. The room seemed to tilt. Sarah gripped the edge of the table, feeling Zeus press against her leg in support. Agent Walsh opened a thick folder. "We've documented 17 missing children across Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana, all from single-parent households facing financial crisis. All approached by a pediatrician offering temporary solutions to their problems." "Jesus Christ," Sheriff Garrett whispered. 17? "That we know of. The pattern is always the same. Target desperate parents, offer financial help in exchange for temporary custody, then relocate the children through an underground network of wealthy buyers who want rescued American orphans from tragic circumstances." Sarah's hands shook as she looked through the files. Photograph after photograph of missing children, all roughly the same age as Carlos, Sophia, Emma, and Lily. All smiling in family photos, all gone without a trace until now. "The children you found aren't the end of this operation," Agent Walsh continued. "They're the beginning. Based on our investigation, we believe Dr. Whitmore has been using Millbrook as a staging area. The clean, comfortable underground facility wasn't permanent housing. It was a preparation center." "Preparation for what?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "International trafficking. The children were being conditioned, documented, and prepared for transport to overseas buyers, wealthy couples who pay premium prices for healthy American children with fabricated tragic backstories." The room fell silent except for Zeus's restless movement. He'd moved to the window, staring in the direction of the town center with intense focus. Agent Walsh's colleague, Agent Torres, spoke for the first time. "There's more, Detective. We've been monitoring communications, and we believe there are other children currently in the system. The barn facility was scheduled for collection tomorrow night." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Other children? Where?" "That's what we need to find out. According to our intelligence, Dr. Whitmore, or Whitfield, was preparing for a major shipment. Multiple children from different acquisition points, all converging on a central location for transport." Sheriff Garrett leaned forward, his voice hoarse. "How many are we talking about?" Intelligence suggests as many as 8 to 12 children, ranging in age from 5 to 14, all acquired through the same method, targeting desperate parents, offering financial solutions, then exploiting their desperation. Sarah stood abruptly, causing Zeus to turn from the window. We need to search his clinic, his home, every property he's connected to. If there are more children out there, we've had surveillance on Dr. Whitmore since the community meeting ended, Agent Walsh interrupted. He's been making calls, moving equipment. He knows we're closing in. As if summoned by her words, Agent Torres's phone buzzed. He answered it quickly, his face growing pale as he listened. Copy that. Maintain surveillance, but do not approach. He hung up and looked at the group grimly. Dr. Whitmore just left his clinic carrying several large duffel bags. He's heading toward the old mining road outside town. Sarah's heart raced. The old mining road led to a network of abandoned copper mines, some dating back over a century. Perfect hiding places for someone who needed to conceal illegal activities. Zeus began pacing, his agitation increasing. We need to move now, Sarah said, standing. If he's relocating evidence or... She couldn't finish the sentence. The thought of more children trapped underground, possibly in worse conditions than the Henderson barn, made her sick. Detective, this needs to be handled by federal agents, Agent Walsh said firmly. We can't risk civilian involvement in what could be a dangerous situation. With respect, Agent Walsh, Zeus found the first children when human investigators missed them completely. You're going to need him if there are others hidden in those mine shafts. Sheriff Garrett nodded slowly. Sarah's right. Those mines form a maze going back miles into the mountains. Without Zeus's tracking ability, we could search for days and find nothing. Agent Walsh hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and practicality. Zeus settled the debate by moving to the door and whining urgently, his message clear. Time was running out. 15 minutes, she conceded. We leave in 15 minutes. Full tactical support. But Detective, if I say your dog backs off, he backs off immediately. As the agents prepared their equipment, Sarah knelt beside Zeus in the parking lot, looking into his intelligent amber eyes. I know you understand what's at stake, boy. Those children are counting on us. Zeus pressed his head against her chest, a gesture of both affection and determination. Whatever lay ahead in those dark mountain tunnels, they would face it together. The drive to the mining road took 20 minutes through winding mountain passes. 3 FBI vehicles followed Sarah's patrol car, their headlights cutting through the Colorado darkness. Zeus sat alert in the passenger seat, his nose working the air currents flowing through the slightly open window. As they approached the area where Dr. Whitmore's vehicle had been spotted, Zeus's behavior changed dramatically. He began panting heavily, whining with increasing urgency, and pawing at the window. Sarah had seen this behavior only once before, at the Henderson barn, moments before they'd discovered the hidden entrance. We're close, she radioed to the FBI convoy. Zeus is showing definite signs of human detection. Agent Walsh's voice crackled back. Copy that. Target vehicle located approximately half a mile ahead, abandoned near mine entrance 7. All units proceed with extreme caution. The abandoned silver sedan sat empty beside a partially collapsed mine entrance, its doors standing open as if the driver had left in haste. Powerful FBI flashlights illuminated scattered papers and medical supplies around the vehicle, evidence of hasty evacuation. Zeus leaped from the patrol car before Sarah could stop him, immediately racing toward the mine entrance with single-minded determination. His bark echoed off the rocky walls, not his normal alert bark, but the desperate, urgent sound Sarah had learned to recognize as his signal for imminent danger. Zeus, wait! Sarah called, following him into the darkness with her own flashlight. Behind her, she could hear the FBI agents coordinating their approach, but Zeus's urgency suggested they didn't have time for careful protocol. 20 feet into the mine shaft, Zeus stopped abruptly and began digging at what appeared to be a pile of loose rocks and debris. As Sarah's flashlight beam illuminated the area more clearly, she realized the rocks weren't naturally placed. They were covering something. Something that, as Zeus's frantic digging revealed, looked suspiciously like another hidden entrance. But this one was different from the Henderson barn. This one had been hastily sealed, as if someone had been in a desperate hurry to hide what lay beneath. And from somewhere deep below, Sarah could swear she heard the faintest sound, a child's voice calling for help. The mine shaft descended into darkness like the throat of some ancient beast. Sarah's flashlight beam cut through the blackness as she followed Zeus deeper into the tunnel, FBI agents close behind. The German shepherd moved with deadly purpose, his nose pressed to the rocky floor, following a scent trail invisible to human senses. "How far back do these tunnels go?" Agent Walsh asked Sheriff Garrett, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "Miles," Garrett replied grimly. "The whole mountain's honeycombed with them. Some go back to the 1880s. Perfect place to hide something you don't want found." Zeus stopped abruptly at what appeared to be a solid rock wall, but his intense scratching revealed loose stones that had been carefully arranged to look natural. Behind the makeshift barrier, Sarah's flashlight illuminated another passage, this one showing signs of recent use, footprints in the dust, discarded water bottles, and most chillingly, a small pink hair ribbon caught on a protruding rock. "Someone's been here recently," Agent Torres observed, photographing the evidence with his camera flash. "Multiple people, including children." The sound came again, faint but unmistakable. A child's voice, weak with exhaustion and fear, calling from somewhere deep in the mountain. "Please, is someone there? We're scared." Sarah's heart clenched. Zeus had already started down the new passage, his urgency increasing with each step. The tunnel widened into a natural cavern, and that's where they found them. 8 children, ages ranging from about 6 to 14, huddled together in sleeping bags around battery-powered lanterns. They were clean and apparently well-fed, but their faces showed the hollow-eyed exhaustion of prolonged captivity. At the sight of flashlights and uniformed agents, the older children protectively gathered the younger ones behind them. "It's okay," Sarah called softly, holstering her weapon and kneeling to appear less threatening. "We're police officers. We're here to take you home." A boy who couldn't be more than 12 stepped forward, his voice shaking but determined. "Are you really police?" "Dr. Marcus said people might come pretending to be police to take us away from him." Sarah felt sick. The psychological conditioning was deeper than she'd initially understood. "Yes, sweetheart, we're really police. This is Agent Walsh with the FBI, and this is Zeus. He's the one who found you." At the mention of Zeus, several of the children perked up. Dogs, apparently, hadn't been part of Dr. Whitmore's manipulation strategy. Zeus approached slowly, his training evident in how he modulated his behavior around traumatized children. The youngest, a girl with blonde curls who couldn't be more than 6, reached out tentatively to pet him. "He's soft," she whispered, the first smile any of them had shown. "Is he a good dog?" "The best," Sarah assured her. "His name is Zeus, and he's been looking for you for a very long time." As FBI agents began the careful process of documenting the scene and preparing the children for evacuation, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the corner of the cavern sat a sophisticated communications setup, laptop computer, satellite internet connection, and what appeared to be video recording equipment. Agent Walsh followed her gaze and swore softly. He was documenting them, probably streaming to potential buyers. The full horror of the operation began to sink in. This wasn't just child trafficking. It was a sophisticated international marketplace where wealthy buyers could essentially shop for children online, watching them interact, selecting favorites like items from a catalog. "How long have you been here?" Agent Torres asked the oldest boy gently. "I think maybe 3 weeks. It's hard to tell. Dr. Marcus brought us here after the other place got too crowded. He said we were going to meet our new families soon, people who really wanted us and could take better care of us than our old families could." The psychological manipulation was expertly crafted. Dr. Whitmore had convinced these children that their parents had abandoned them, that he was rescuing them from inadequate care, that the wealthy buyers were generous families offering better lives. "Where is Dr. Marcus now?" Sarah asked carefully. The children exchanged nervous glances. "He left this morning," a girl of about 10 answered. "He seemed really upset about something. He said he had to go away for a while, but that someone would come get us soon to take us to our new homes." Agent Walsh was already coordinating evacuation procedures via radio when Zeus suddenly stiffened, his hackles rising as he stared toward the back of the cavern. Sarah followed his gaze and noticed something they'd missed in the initial sweep. Another passage, partially concealed behind what looked like mining equipment. "There's more back there," she said, her heart sinking. Zeus was already moving toward the hidden passage, his behavior indicating he'd detected something significant. The concealed tunnel led to a smaller chamber that made Sarah's stomach turn. This room was different, sterile, clinical, with medical equipment and filing cabinets full of documentation. But what drew her attention immediately were the photographs covering one wall. Hundreds of them. Children of all ages, some clearly taken without the subject's knowledge, others appearing to be posed portraits. Agent Walsh moved to the filing cabinets while Sarah examined the photographs. Many of the faces were familiar from the missing children reports they'd reviewed earlier. But there were others, children she didn't recognize, some clearly taken in different locations, different seasons. "Jesus Christ," Agent Walsh breathed, pulling files from the cabinet. "This goes back years. Look at this." She handed Sarah a thick folder labeled Acquisition and Processing Protocols. Inside were detailed psychological profiles of target families, financial records showing payments to desperate parents, and most disturbing of all, buyer preference sheets with specific requests for children matching certain physical and personality criteria. He was running a custom operation, Sarah realized with horror. Taking orders for specific types of children, then targeting families who fit the criteria. Zeus had moved to another corner of the room where he was pawing at what appeared to be a loose floorboard. Beneath it, they found a metal strongbox containing cash, false identification documents, and travel itineraries. Dr. Marcus Whitmore, or Marcus Whitfield, or whatever his real name was, had been preparing to disappear with a substantial payout. But the most chilling discovery was a handwritten ledger detailing transactions. 17 children over the past 2 years, with prices ranging from $50,000 to over $200,000 depending on the child's age, appearance, and background. The buyers were listed only by code names, but the addresses were international: Switzerland, Dubai, Singapore, places where wealthy individuals could acquire orphaned American children with fabricated tragic backstories. "We need to get those children out of here now," Agent Walsh said, her professional composure finally cracking. "If Whitmore realizes we've found his operations center, he might try to eliminate evidence." The evacuation took 2 hours. 8 more children, all between the ages of 6 and 14, all believing they'd been rescued from inadequate families and were waiting to be adopted by people who really wanted them. The psychological damage would take years to undo, assuming it could be undone at all. As the last child was helped into an FBI transport vehicle, Sarah sat on a rock outside the mine entrance with Zeus at her side. The German shepherd was finally calm, his mission accomplished. But Sarah felt as though she'd been hit by a truck. 17 children. 2 years of systematic trafficking. A beloved community doctor revealed as an international criminal. Eleanor Hartwell's sedan pulled up just as the FBI convoy was preparing to leave. The 72-year-old retired principal got out slowly, her face aged by the events of the past few days. "I came to see if I could help," Eleanor said simply. "These babies are going to need people who understand that healing takes time." Sarah looked at the older woman with newfound respect. Even in the face of unimaginable horror, Eleanor's first instinct was to nurture, to help, to heal. "Mrs. Hartwell," Agent Walsh approached them. "We're going to need community support for these children's reintegration. Some of them have been missing for months. Their families have been through hell." Eleanor nodded firmly. "You just tell me what needs doing. This community failed these children once by not seeing the danger right in front of us. We won't fail them again." As they spoke, Zeus suddenly perked up, staring down the mountain road with intense focus. Sarah followed his gaze and saw headlights approaching in the distance. A single vehicle, moving fast on the winding mountain road. "That could be him," Agent Torres said, reaching for his radio. "All units, unknown vehicle approaching from the south. Proceed with extreme caution." The final confrontation with Dr. Marcus Whitmore was about to begin. The silver Toyota Camry crested the mountain road at dangerous speed, its headlights sweeping wildly as the driver took the curves too fast. Sarah could see the desperation in the erratic driving pattern. Someone running out of options, out of time, out of hope. "All units, target vehicle approaching mining access road," Agent Walsh spoke into her radio. "Suspect is likely armed and extremely dangerous. Children have been evacuated, so we're clear to use necessary force." Zeus pressed against Sarah's leg, his body tense but controlled. The German Shepherd's training was evident in how he remained alert without aggression, ready to respond, but not reactive. After hours of rescue operations, he seemed to understand that the most dangerous part was yet to come. The Camry skidded to a stop 50 yards from the FBI convoy, its engine still running. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened slowly, and Dr. Marcus Whitmore stepped out with his hands visible but not raised. Even in the harsh glare of the tactical lights, he looked like the same respected pediatrician who had delivered half of Millbrook's children. Silver hair, perfectly styled, wearing his customary cardigan over pressed khakis, he appeared more like someone heading to a community potluck than an international child trafficker caught in the act. "Dr. Whitmore," Agent Walsh called through a megaphone, "keep your hands where we can see them and walk slowly toward the sound of my voice." Instead of complying, Dr. Whitmore reached into his jacket pocket. Every FBI agent tensed, weapons drawn, but what he withdrew wasn't a gun. It was a cell phone. "I need to make a call," he said, his voice carrying across the mountain silence with eerie calm, to explain to people who might not understand the situation. "Sir, put the phone down and approach with your hands visible," Agent Walsh commanded, but Dr. Whitmore was already dialing. "This is Marcus," he said into the phone, his voice conversational despite 20 armed federal agents pointing weapons at him. "Yes, I know it's late. The situation has become complicated. You need to activate the contingency protocols immediately." Sarah felt ice water flow through her veins. Contingency protocols. There were more children somewhere, and Dr. Whitmore was triggering some kind of emergency plan to move or hide them. "End the call now," Agent Torres shouted, "or we will take you down." Dr. Whitmore smiled, actually smiled, as he pocketed the phone. "Too late, I'm afraid. The network is much larger than you realize. This operation in Millbrook was just one small piece of a much bigger picture." He began walking toward the FBI line, his movements calm and deliberate. "You've rescued 12 children tonight. Congratulations. But there are dozens more in the system, and by morning they'll all be relocated to places you'll never find them." "You son of a bitch!" Sheriff Garrett growled, stepping forward before Agent Walsh restrained him. "Sheriff, please," Dr. Whitmore said with the same gentle tone he used with frightened children. "I understand you're upset, but try to see the bigger picture. These children were living in poverty, neglect, sometimes abuse. I provided them with education, health care, nutrition, and ultimately, families who truly wanted them and could provide opportunities their birth parents never could." Sarah couldn't contain herself anymore. "You stole them from their mothers." "I saved them from a cycle of poverty and neglect," Dr. Whitmore replied calmly. Maria Santos was working 80 hours a week and couldn't afford basic medical care for her twins. The Hendersons' children were eating one meal a day while their father spent grocery money on alcohol. "The Peterson girl was being molested by her mother's boyfriend. I gave all of them better lives." The rationalization was so complete, so thoroughly convinced of its own righteousness, that Sarah felt physically sick. This man genuinely believed he was a savior, that kidnapping children and selling them to the highest bidder was an act of compassion. Zeus suddenly tensed, his attention shifting from Dr. Whitmore to something behind the FBI line. Sarah followed his gaze and saw what had alarmed him. A figure moving through the darkness beyond the range of the tactical lights. Someone else was out there. "Agent Walsh," Sarah said quietly, "we're not alone up here." Before the FBI agent could respond, gunfire erupted from the tree line. Not aimed at law enforcement, but at Dr. Whitmore. The pediatrician dropped to the ground as bullets shattered the rocks around him, his calm demeanor finally cracking into panic. "Get down!" Agent Torres shouted as the FBI team scattered for cover behind their vehicles. "Sniper in the trees!" But the shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. In the sudden silence, Sarah could hear Dr. Whitmore moaning in pain, clutching his shoulder where blood was seeping through his cardigan. "Help me," he called weakly. "Please, I'm hit." Agent Walsh signaled for the team medic while maintaining tactical formation. As the medic reached Dr. Whitmore, the wounded man grabbed his arm desperately. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice weak but urgent. "They don't just want the children moved. The contingency protocol. They're going to eliminate the evidence. All of it." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean, eliminate the evidence?" Dr. Whitmore's eyes were glazing with shock, but his words were clear. "The children. They're going to kill them all rather than risk exposure. I never meant for this to happen." "I was supposed to be helping them." The man who had rationalized kidnapping as rescue work was finally facing the reality of what his network was capable of when threatened. And somewhere in the Colorado mountains, an unknown number of children were running out of time. Zeus whined softly, pressing closer to Sarah as if sensing the escalating danger. The rescue operation had become something much worse, a race against time to prevent a massacre. The Emergency Operations Center, set up in the Millbrook Fire Station, buzzed with desperate activity. FBI agents coordinated with state police, while Sarah paced anxiously with Zeus at her side. Dr. Whitmore lay sedated in the ambulance outside, his shoulder wound stabilized, but his information proving more horrifying with each revelation. Agent Walsh hung up from a call to FBI headquarters, her face grim. "We've identified 3 additional sites across Colorado and Wyoming. The network was larger than we imagined, 17 adults involved, including social workers, judges, and law enforcement officials in multiple states." Sheriff Garrett shook his head in disgust. 17 adults, all covering for this monster. "The problem is time," Agent Torres said, studying a map spread across the table. "According to Whitmore's files, there are at least 22 more children in the system. The contingency protocol he mentioned appears to be a complete elimination of evidence." Sarah felt sick. "You mean they're going to kill them?" That's exactly what it means, Agent Walsh confirmed. We've got tactical teams moving on all known locations, but this organization has been operating for over 5 years. They've had time to develop multiple backup sites we don't know about. Eleanor Hartwell entered the fire station carrying thermoses of coffee and a determined expression that reminded everyone why she'd been able to manage unruly teenagers for 4 decades. At 72, she moved with the purposeful energy of someone half her age. "Any word on the children?" she asked, immediately understanding the gravity of the situation. "We're running out of time," Sarah admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. Zeus looked up at Eleanor with what seemed like relief. Even in crisis, the dog recognized safety and comfort when he saw it. "Then we'd better stop running and start thinking," Eleanor said practically. "I've lived in this area my whole life. There are places up in those mountains that don't appear on any modern map. Old mining camps, logging stations, even some homesteader cabins from the 1800s. Agent Walsh looked up with interest. "Can you mark them for us?" "Better than that," Eleanor said, pulling out her late husband's geological survey maps. Harold worked for the Forestry Service for 30 years. These maps show every structure, every mine shaft, every access road in a 100-mile radius. As Eleanor spread the detailed maps across the table, Sarah noticed Zeus becoming restless again. The German shepherd was pacing, whining softly and periodically looking toward the station's exit as if he wanted to leave. "What is it, boy?" Sarah knelt beside him, studying his behavior. In 4 years of partnership, she'd learned to read Zeus's moods like a book. This wasn't anxiety or fatigue. This was focused determination. Zeus walked to the door, looked back at Sarah, then returned to press his nose against one of Eleanor's maps, specifically against a location marked as Abandoned Forestry Station, Elk Ridge. "He's trying to tell us something," Sarah said, feeling the familiar chill she got when Zeus's instincts kicked in. Eleanor studied the location Zeus had indicated. Elk Ridge. That's about 20 miles north. The old forestry station was abandoned in the 1980s, but the buildings are still standing, remote enough that you could hide an army up there and nobody would know. Agent Walsh was already coordinating with her tactical teams when Sarah's radio crackled to life. "All units, we have multiple explosions reported at the Copper Creek site. Repeat, explosions at Copper Creek." The room fell silent. Agent Torres answered his phone, his face growing pale as he listened. "Copy that." "Understood." He hung up and looked around the room. "The Copper Creek facility has been destroyed. Looks like controlled explosions, probably triggered remotely. No survivors found." The weight of those words hit everyone simultaneously. The network wasn't just eliminating evidence, they were systematically destroying all traces of their operation, including the children who could testify against them. "How many children were at Copper Creek?" Eleanor asked quietly. "According to Whitmore's files, 6, Agent Walsh replied, her professional composure cracking slightly. Sarah felt Zeus press against her leg, offering comfort while somehow also conveying urgency. The dog seemed to understand that time was running out for other children, and that understanding was pushing him to act. "We need to get to Elk Ridge now," Sarah said, standing abruptly. "If Zeus is right and there are children there—" "Detective, you're not trained for tactical operations," Agent Walsh interrupted. "This needs to be handled by people who might not find the children in time," Sarah shot back. "Agent Walsh, with respect, your tactical teams are excellent at what they do. But Zeus has found every child we've rescued so far, every single one." Sheriff Garrett stepped forward. "Sarah's right. That dog's track record speaks for itself." Eleanor moved to the map, tracing a route with her finger. "There's a back road that leads to Elk Ridge. It's not on modern GPS systems, but it cuts the travel time in half. Harold used to take me up there for picnics when we were first married." Agent Walsh hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the ticking clock. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call, and her face went white as she listened. "Understood. We'll be there in 20 minutes." She hung up and looked at the group. Second Sight just went up in flames. Pine Valley facility. 4 more children. The math was becoming horrifyingly clear. The network was systematically eliminating every location where children were being held. If there were children at Elk Ridge, they had minutes rather than hours before the site was destroyed. "I'm going," Sarah said, heading for the door with Zeus at her side. "With or without FBI support?" "Sarah, wait," Agent Walsh called. "If you're right about the location, going in alone is suicide. These people have already killed 10 children tonight rather than risk exposure. They won't hesitate to kill you, too." Eleanor Hartwell stood up slowly, her decision written clearly on her face. "She won't be going alone." "Mrs. Hartwell, absolutely not," Sheriff Garrett protested. "You're 72 years old." "Which means I've got 72 years of experience dealing with dangerous situations and protecting children," Eleanor replied firmly. "Plus, I know those mountain roads better than anyone in this room. Sarah and Zeus will need a guide." Before anyone could argue further, Zeus walked to Eleanor and sat beside her, his message clear. The dog had made his choice about who to trust in this crisis. Agent Walsh made a quick calculation. 10 minutes head start. We'll follow with full tactical support, but Detective Mitchell, if you encounter hostiles, you retreat immediately. No heroics." "Understood," Sarah agreed, though they all knew that if children were in immediate danger, retreat wouldn't be an option. As Sarah, Eleanor, and Zeus piled into the patrol car, Agent Walsh grabbed Sarah's arm. "Detective, these people have already killed 10 children tonight to protect their operation. They've got nothing left to lose." Sarah looked down at Zeus, who was alert and focused in the back seat, then at Eleanor, whose hands were steady on Harold's old maps, despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "Neither do we," Sarah replied. The patrol car disappeared into the Colorado darkness, racing against time and carrying the hopes of children whose lives depended on a retired school principal's memory, a detective's courage, and a German shepherd's extraordinary ability to find the lost. Behind them, FBI tactical teams scrambled to coordinate support, while radio reports continued to come in from other sites. The network was methodically destroying evidence across 3 states, but they had underestimated the determination of a small mountain community that had finally awakened to the evil in their midst. In the back seat, Zeus remained alert and focused, his amber eyes reflecting the dashboard lights as he stared ahead into the darkness. Somewhere in those mountains, children were waiting for rescue, and Zeus had never failed to find them. The final race had begun. The old forestry road to Elk Ridge hadn't been maintained in decades. Sarah's patrol car lurched through potholes and over fallen branches as Eleanor guided them through turns that existed only in memory and on Harold's hand-drawn maps. Zeus rode in the back seat, alert but calm, his presence somehow reassuring despite the gravity of their mission. "There," Eleanor pointed through the windshield at a break in the tree line. "The station should be just over that rise." Sarah cut the headlights and engine, letting the car coast to a stop behind a stand of pine trees. In the sudden silence, they could hear the mountain wind and, more ominously, the distant hum of generators. "Someone's definitely up there," Sarah whispered, reaching for her service weapon. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need you to stay with the car and—" "Like hell I will," Eleanor interrupted with surprising steel in her voice. "If there are children up there, they're going to need someone who knows how to comfort scared babies. You're a fine officer, Sarah Mitchell, but you're not a grandmother." Before Sarah could argue, Zeus had already exited the patrol car and was moving purposefully toward the ridge. His body language was different from his usual tracking mode, more cautious, almost predatory. He'd detected something dangerous. They crested the hill on foot, staying low among the trees. Below them, the old forestry station had been transformed into something resembling a military compound. Multiple vehicles surrounded the main buildings, and armed figures moved between structures with tactical precision. Worst of all, Sarah could see what appeared to be timing devices attached to several buildings, their red displays visible even from their hiding position. "Dear God," Eleanor breathed. "How many children do you think are down there?" Zeus had positioned himself at the edge of the tree line, his hackles raised, but his training keeping him still. Sarah followed his gaze and felt her heart sink. Through the windows of the largest building she could see small figures moving around, children, maybe a dozen of them, all in what appeared to be a single room. "Too many," Sarah whispered into her radio. "Agent Walsh, we've got visual on the Elk Ridge site. Multiple hostiles, armed and organized. I count at least 12 children visible in the main building, and there are timing devices on the structures." Static crackled back through the radio. "Copy that, Detective. ETA on tactical support is 15 minutes. Do not engage until—" The radio died abruptly as one of the figures below produced what looked like a signal jammer. Sarah and Eleanor were now completely cut off from backup, with a dozen children about to be killed and no way to call for help. "We can't wait 15 minutes, Eleanor said, studying the compound through Harold's old binoculars. "Look at those timers. They're all counting down, and the largest one shows less than 10 minutes. Sarah felt the weight of impossible decisions. Protocol demanded she wait for backup, but protocol hadn't anticipated a situation where children would be murdered while she watched helplessly from the trees. Zeus made the decision for her. The German shepherds suddenly bolted from their hiding position, racing down the hillside toward the compound with purposeful determination. His movement triggered immediate response from the guards, who shouted warnings and raised their weapons. "Zeus, no!" Sarah called, but she was already running after him, her service weapon drawn. Eleanor followed, moving with surprising agility for a 72-year-old woman. "Sarah, the back of the building! There's a service entrance Harold showed me years ago." The compound erupted into chaos. Guards were shouting, dogs were barking, several attack dogs had been released to pursue Zeus, and Sarah could hear children screaming from inside the buildings. Zeus had created exactly the distraction they needed, drawing attention away from the main structure where the children were held. Sarah reached the service entrance Eleanor had indicated, just as the first explosion shook the ground. One of the smaller buildings had detonated, sending debris flying across the compound. The timers weren't just for show. The network was systematically destroying evidence, and the main building was next. The service door was locked, but Sarah's tactical training kicked in. 2 shots to the hinges, and a kick sent the door flying inward. Eleanor was right behind her as they entered what appeared to be a kitchen facility. The sound of children crying led them through a maze of corridors to a large common room where 13 children, ranging in age from about 5 to 15, huddled together in terror. They'd been conditioned to fear authority figures, but Eleanor's grandmother presence seemed to cut through their programming. "It's okay, babies," Eleanor said in the voice that had comforted thousands of students over 4 decades. "We're here to take you home." The oldest boy, maybe 14, stepped protectively in front of the younger children. "Who are you?" "The guard said people might come pretending to help us." "I'm Mrs. Hartwell," Eleanor said gently, "and this is Detective Mitchell. We're not pretending anything. We're here because a very special dog named Zeus heard you and came to find you." At the mention of Zeus, several children perked up. Even in their fear, the idea of a rescue dog seemed to penetrate their conditioning. "Where is the dog?" a little girl asked, clutching a stuffed animal that had seen better days. Before Sarah could answer, gunfire erupted outside, followed by the distinctive sound of Zeus's bark, not distressed but aggressive. The German shepherd was fighting for his life against the attack dogs while drawing guards away from the building. "We need to move now," Sarah said, checking her watch. The timer on the main building showed 4 minutes and counting. "Everyone hold hands, stay together, and follow Mrs. Hartwell." Eleanor had already begun organizing the children with the efficiency of someone who'd managed fire drills for decades. But as they reached the service entrance, Sarah realized their escape route was blocked. 3 armed guards had positioned themselves outside, apparently realizing that the building evacuation was more than coincidental. "Back inside," Sarah whispered, pushing Eleanor and the children away from the door. "We need another way out." That's when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The timer on the wall inside the building showed 3 minutes and 15 seconds, but it wasn't connected to the same system as the timers outside. This building had its own separate countdown, and it was nearly 30 seconds ahead of the external timers. They had less than 3 minutes before the building exploded with all of them inside. "Mrs. Hartwell," Sarah said quietly, "I need you to get these children as far from this building as possible. The windows on the north side. Break them out and get everyone clear." "What about you?" "I'm going to help Zeus and try to buy you time," Sarah said, checking her ammunition. She had 12 rounds left, and no backup coming for at least 10 more minutes. Eleanor studied Sarah's face and seemed to understand what the younger woman was really saying. "You're not planning to come back, are you? Just promise me you'll get those babies to safety." Before Eleanor could respond, the sound of gunfire outside intensified. Zeus's barking had taken on a desperate quality. He was hurt or cornered or both. Sarah couldn't abandon him any more than she could abandon the children. 2 minutes 30 seconds, the oldest boy announced, reading the timer with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who'd been taught to track time carefully. Sarah made her decision. "Mrs. Hartwell, start breaking windows. Get everyone out the north side and as far from this building as you can get. When the FBI arrives, tell them what happened here." She headed for the main entrance, but Eleanor's voice stopped her. "Sarah Mitchell, you listen to me. I've buried 1 child already in my lifetime. I'll be damned if I'm going to watch another one die trying to be a hero." Eleanor handed the children to the oldest boy. "Tommy, you get everyone out those windows right now. Mrs. Hartwell will be right behind you." Instead of evacuating with the children, Eleanor grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and positioned herself beside the door. "If we're making a stand, we make it together." Outside, the gunfire stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, Sarah could hear Zeus whimpering, the first sound of pain she'd ever heard from him. The German shepherd was hurt, possibly dying, and the children in their care had 90 seconds before the building exploded. Sarah looked at Eleanor, 72 years old, armed with a kitchen knife, prepared to fight trained killers to protect children she'd never met before tonight. In that moment, Sarah understood why Zeus had chosen to trust this woman, why the dog had recognized something in Eleanor that transcended age or experience. "On 3, Sarah whispered, her hand on the door handle. 1, 2. The door exploded inward as FBI tactical teams breached the compound. Agent Walsh burst through, followed by a squad of agents in full combat gear. "Building's rigged to blow," Sarah shouted. 90 seconds. "All children accounted for?" Agent Walsh asked, already coordinating evacuation procedures. 13 kids. Mrs. Hartwell's getting them out the north windows," Sarah replied. "But Zeus is out there somewhere, hurt." "Detective, we evacuate now." "That's an order." But Sarah was already moving toward the sound of Zeus's whimpering. She found him behind the generator shed, his left hind leg clearly broken, surrounded by the bodies of 3 attack dogs. The German shepherd had fought them off, but at terrible cost. "Come on, boy," Sarah whispered, scooping up all 75 pounds of injured dog. "Let's go home." The explosion, when it came, shattered windows for half a mile in every direction. Sarah and Zeus were thrown to the ground by the shockwave, but they were both alive. Eleanor and all 13 children had made it to safety beyond the blast radius, where FBI medics were already treating them for shock and minor injuries. As the flames lit up the Colorado sky, Sarah sat in the back of an ambulance with Zeus's head in her lap, while a veterinarian from Colorado State University worked to set his broken leg. The German shepherd's eyes were alert despite his injuries, and his tail thumped weakly when Eleanor approached. 37 children, Agent Walsh reported, sitting down beside them. That's how many we saved tonight across 4 states. The entire network has been dismantled. What about the people running it? Sarah asked. Dead or in custody. The man who shot Dr. Whitmore was apparently sent to eliminate him as a liability. We got him before he could complete the job. Eleanor reached down to stroke Zeus's head gently. And Dr. Whitmore? Singing like a canary. Turns out when you're facing life in prison, loyalty to child traffickers becomes less important than plea bargaining. As dawn broke over the Colorado mountains, Sarah realized that Zeus was looking at her with what seemed like satisfaction. Not just the satisfaction of a job well done, but something deeper. He'd protected what mattered most, children who couldn't protect themselves. And he'd done it alongside humans he trusted completely. You know what the best part is? Eleanor said, watching as reunification efforts began in the valley below. These children are going home to families who never stopped looking for them, never stopped loving them. Sarah looked down at Zeus, whose eyes were finally beginning to close as the veterinary sedatives took effect. Just like someone else I know who never stopped looking for lost souls. The German shepherd's tail thumped once more before he drifted off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that his pack, Sarah, Eleanor, and 37 rescued children, was finally safe. 6 months later, the morning sun painted the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and amber as Sarah Mitchell sat on her front porch with Zeus stretched contentedly at her feet. The German shepherd's left hind leg bore the permanent reminder of their final confrontation, a slight limp that did nothing to diminish his dignity or determination. At 5 years old, Zeus had officially retired from active K9 duty, but his real work had just begun. The mailbox at the end of Sarah's driveway overflowed with letters from across the country. Thank you notes from the 37 families whose children had been rescued, invitations to speak at law enforcement conferences, and most touching of all, drawings from children who wanted to tell Zeus they were safe and happy at home. Eleanor Hartwell's Victorian house had been transformed into the Zeus Foundation Community Center, a place where families could find support before crisis drove them to desperate decisions. The front parlor, where Eleanor once ate lonely dinners talking to Timothy's photograph, now bustled with after-school tutoring programs. The kitchen that had served meals for one now prepared daily snacks for dozens of children whose laughter filled rooms that had been silent too long. You know what I realized? Eleanor said, settling into the wicker chair beside Sarah with 2 steaming cups of coffee. At 73, she moved with the purposeful energy of someone who had rediscovered her calling. I spent 3 years mourning Timothy by trying to preserve everything exactly as it was when he died. But children aren't meant to be preserved like museum pieces. They're meant to be celebrated by loving new children. Zeus raised his grizzled muzzle at the sound of Eleanor's voice, his tail thumping against the porch boards. The bond between the retired principal and the retired K9 had deepened over the months of healing. Eleanor had taken over Zeus's physical therapy, walking him daily through Millbrook's neighborhoods while sharing stories about the town's history and the children she'd taught over 4 decades. He's looking better every day, Sarah observed, scratching behind Zeus's ears. Dr. Peterson says the limp might improve even more with time. Bodies heal, Eleanor said wisely, but it's the hearts that take longer. Those children we saved, some of them are still having nightmares, still learning to trust that they're truly safe. The Zeus Foundation had become a model for rural community support, featured in national magazines and studied by social workers across the country. But Sarah knew the real success wasn't measured in media coverage or government grants. It was measured in the small victories that happened every day. Maria Santos had graduated from community college and was now pursuing her master's degree in social work while working part-time at the foundation. Her twins, Carlos and Sofia, had not only recovered from their trauma, but had become unofficial ambassadors for the center, helping newer children understand that healing was possible. "Mama says we're going to help other kids who got scared like we did," Sofia had explained to a reporter last month, her 7-year-old certainty making hardened journalists wipe their eyes. The financial transformation had been equally remarkable. Dr. Whitmore's seized assets, combined with donations that poured in from across the country, had established an endowment ensuring the foundation's permanent operation. More importantly, it had created a safety net for families facing the kind of desperation that made them vulnerable to predators. No parent should have to choose between poverty and keeping their children, Eleanor often said during her speaking engagements. Community means we catch families before they fall, not after they've already hit bottom. Sheriff Frank Garrett had postponed his retirement to oversee the implementation of new protocols designed to identify and support at-risk families. The Zeus alert system, named in honor of the German Shepherd's extraordinary instincts, trained law enforcement officers to recognize signs of family distress before children went missing. "That dog taught us to listen with our hearts, not just our heads," Garrett had told a gathering of police chiefs from across the region. "Sometimes the most important evidence walks on 4 legs and speaks without words." Sarah's own transformation had been perhaps the most profound. At 59, she'd discovered that retirement from active duty didn't mean retirement from service. The Zeus Foundation's K9 therapy program had become a national model, with Sarah training both dogs and handlers to work with traumatized children. "Detective Mitchell," a voice called from the street, interrupting Sarah's morning reflections. A young woman approached the porch, leading a boy of about 8, who hung back shyly behind her. "Just Sarah now," Sarah smiled, recognizing Jenny Walsh, one of the social workers from the foundation. "What brings you by this morning?" "I'd like you and Zeus to meet Tommy Henderson," Jenny said gently. "Tommy's mom is starting the recovery program next week, and he's been asking about the dog who finds lost children." Tommy Henderson stepped forward slowly, his eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. "Are you really Zeus, the one who saved all those kids?" Zeus seemed to understand the solemnity of the moment. The big German shepherd rose carefully, favoring his injured leg, and approached Tommy with the gentle dignity that had made him legendary among the children of Millbrook Valley. He sat directly in front of the boy, patient and calm, letting Tommy decide whether to make contact. "He's not scary at all," Tommy said with wonder, reaching out to stroke Zeus's head. "He's got nice eyes." "Zeus has always been good at seeing into people's hearts," Sarah explained. "He can tell the difference between someone who means harm and someone who just needs help." Eleanor appeared with a plate of fresh cookies and a glass of milk for Tommy, her grandmother instincts as sharp as ever. "Would you like to hear about how Zeus found his first lost children? It's quite a story." As Eleanor began weaving the tale with the skill of a born storyteller, Sarah watched Zeus settle beside Tommy's chair, the dog's presence somehow making the boy's shoulders relax and his smile grow brighter. This was Zeus's true gift, not just finding lost children, but helping them find themselves again. The afternoon brought its usual parade of visitors to the Zeus Foundation. High school students volunteering for community service, elderly residents who'd adopted the center as their extended family, and always children who found in Eleanor's Victorian house something they'd never had before: unconditional acceptance and the security of knowing they mattered to someone. Dr. Marcus Whitmore had been sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. The international trafficking network he'd been part of had been completely dismantled, with arrests made in 12 countries. But Sarah rarely thought about him anymore. Hatred was too heavy a burden to carry when there was so much healing work to be done. As evening painted the mountains purple and gold, Sarah and Zeus made their customary patrol through Millbrook's neighborhoods. Not an official patrol, those days were behind them, but a friendly walk that let worried parents know that someone was always watching, always listening, always ready to help. Children waved from windows and front yards, calling out, "Hi, Zeus!" with the casual affection reserved for beloved family pets. Zeus acknowledged each greeting with dignity, his tail wagging as he recognized voices of children whose lives he'd somehow touched. At the memorial garden behind the community center, Sarah paused at the bronze plaque that read, "In honor of Zeus, who taught us that love doesn't need words, courage doesn't require weapons, and sometimes the most important voices are the ones that speak from the heart." "You know what I think, boy?" Sarah said, settling onto the bench beside the memorial garden. "I think you knew all along that your real job wasn't catching criminals. It was teaching the rest of us how to be human again." Zeus laid his grizzled head in Sarah's lap, his amber eyes reflecting the last light of day. In those eyes, Sarah could see everything they'd accomplished together. 37 children reunited with their families, a community awakened to its capacity for compassion, and most importantly, the understanding that heroism wasn't about individual glory, but about the willingness to stand together when it mattered most. As stars began to appear in the Colorado sky, Sarah realized that this was what happiness looked like, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose, the warmth of community, and the unshakable knowledge that every life had value worth fighting for. Zeus's tail thumped once against her leg, and Sarah knew he understood. They had found what they'd been searching for all along: home. Dear friends, at 5568, many of us know the ache of empty nests, the worry about our legacy, and sometimes the loneliness that comes with life's transitions. But Zeus's story reminds us that our most meaningful chapters often begin when we think our story is ending. Like Eleanor, who transformed her grief into purpose, and Sarah, who discovered that retirement from one calling can mean the beginning of another, we each have the power to write new chapters filled with connection and meaning. Sometimes it takes a loyal companion, whether four-legged or two-legged, to show us that our capacity to make a difference only grows with age and experience. The children saved, the families healed, and the community transformed, all because people refused to believe their best days were behind them. What unexpected companion or calling has brought new purpose to your life after 55? Have you found that your greatest impact came not from your career, but from the relationships and community connections you built along the way? Please share your story in the comments below.